Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. This video that I'm filming at the moment, that I'm voiceovering at the moment, is another one of my food videos, so it's the next part in the food preparation, meal planning, all that sort of stuff from the May grocery haul. So we're a week and a half out from the June grocery haul, and this video is sometime in the past week of food related planning. I did just do my Temu haul video, so because I did that, I have the chair and table set out here, so I thought I may as well sit down while I'm doing this. So for anyone who hasn't watched one of my food prep videos before, we shop every 6 weeks and I go 4 hours away to do so. And then because I do that, we have to do a lot of prep planning, meal planning, freezer, preserving, all those sorts of things to make sure that the food that we purchase for the 6-week period lasts for that 6 weeks and beyond. Everyone was always really interested in that. When I started sharing the grocery hauls, they were really interested in how we made the food stretch. So I started doing these videos. I now do them every couple of days with the post the grocery haul. It seems to be working well, intermixed with other videos like the Temu one and my weekly chats about the garden and things like that. I'm actually sitting in front of the new garden bed that I showed in the last video. So I don't know whether the Temu haul video will come out before this one or this one will come out first. But either way, I've mentioned them both in each of them, so hopefully that won't confuse anyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the voiceover as per usual. I have my notes here to do the voiceover for the video that this particular video that I'm doing now, which was using some of the beef trim and things like that, making bulk bolognese, beef stock paste, all that sort of stuff, and I will put it all together for you. So I have been talking for a while now because I did the Temu one first, so hopefully I haven't missed anything because I feel like I've a little bit talked out, but I want to get this done so that I can get the video edited and set up to go in the next few days, because I have at least a couple more food prep videos to go before we hit the planning for the next grocery haul. Yes, my life does revolve completely around food. So I will get that sorted as well. The planning and everything else has to be done too. All the inventory has to be taken, all that sort of stuff. So enjoy watching this one and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks guys. So we started the day off nice and early shaping the brioche dough. So I made this dough the night before. So I do sourdough brioche dough. It's a fairly light brioche. I'll try and remember to put the recipe in the comments, but just prompt me in the comments and I will reply with it. I desperately need to get the website going as per usual. That's a common theme of these videos, is that I really need to get it going. But anyway, so I made the brioche dough last night. It went inside to proof overnight, and then in the morning I divide it up. So the dough that I do is a double mix. It makes 16 rolls, which means that each of us get 2 rolls each, either to consume for dinner or to have as leftovers the next day as well. So I shaped it into the 16 rolls and put that in the trays to give it a second proof so that it could be baked off. So that goes in the tray to rise for however long it takes to do that second proof before it gets baked. For breakfast / lunch today we did Dutch baby, so we got a fair few eggs at the moment. Our chooks are still laying pretty well, not excessively, but we're still getting at least half a dozen to 10 eggs a day out of the chooks, so we've still got a fair few to use. So Dutch baby is one of the ways that we use to go through a bunch of eggs. I make an 18 egg mix and we actually made 2 of them this day, so we went through 36 eggs for this particular batch. I do it in the Thermomix. I pour it all in the Thermomix. It's 18 eggs. It is 600 grams of coconut milk and about 350 grams of flour, pinch of salt. You can also add a bit of sugar and a bit of cinnamon if that's what you want, but you don't have to. And then I just whiz it up on speed 5 in the Thermomix, scrape it down, whiz it up a bit again. You want to put a knob of ghee into your cast iron pans or butter or whatever you're using and get that nice and hot and melted in the bottom of the pan. And then once the batter is ready, you pour it in. So excuse my well-used barbecue and well-used cast iron pans here, they're a little bit worse for wear, but once the batter is all nice and smooth and the ghee is really hot, the pan's really hot, you pour it into that butter to make sure that the butter is going to spread around the pan, and that's going to stop your Dutch baby from sticking, but also help with that initial puff up and rise. So as I said, 2 trays, 18 eggs per tray, and that was a really good use of eggs. We served it up afterwards. So this is what it looks like when it's cooked and fresh out of the oven. It will collapse the longer you let it sit. And then we cut it up and we serve it with whatever we feel like serving with that day. Sometimes we do diced bacon and a bit of maple syrup, or today we had apple scrap syrup. So that was syrup made from the apple cores and peels that were left over when I made some stewed apples for the pantry. So we had apple scrap syrup today. I don't think we had anything else with it. Sometimes we have stewed apples, or we have blueberry compote, or anything. It just really depends on what I feel like that day making. But today I'm pretty sure we just had it with the apple scrap syrup. This is the buns after the second proof, so they've sort of doubled in size. I like to have them spread a little bit more than go higher, because the hamburger buns, I like them to have that little bit of spread. So I want them to spread out in the tray and look like this. I did an egg wash on them, just 1 egg with a little bit of water mixed up and brushed over the top of them, and sprinkled them with sesame seeds, because I really like my buns with sesame seeds. Darryl's not a huge fan of buns with just sesame seeds, but he manages. He learns to deal. So I just washed them with that egg to get them nice and brown on top, and a sprinkle of sesame seeds. If you do not do an egg wash on your brioche rolls, they don't tend to go brown, because you're not cooking, like, they're a light cook, they're not a heavy cook, as in like they're a fairly quick cook, and if you don't put something on the top to help them brown, they look a little bit anemic. So I find that putting that wash in there definitely makes them look more appealing, but it doesn't really matter. After that, I got started on the second bag of beef trim. So anyone who watched before, Costco sells the boxes of the beef that they turn into their mince. I asked last time I was there, because I was wondering if they sold. That's the only way they sell the mince, but he said to me, "But we do have the beef trim that that's what they mince the beef from." So I was asking, and he was willing to sell me a case of that or a box of that. So the box was about 20 kilos of beef trim, and he literally said that that's what they cut up and they mince, and then they mince it again. So they mince it on a coarse, and then they mince it on a fine, and it goes onto the mince trays, and that's what they sell. So that was super exciting for me. Anyway, so I've gone through 10 kilos of it prior in the month. Some of it got frozen, and then this is the second 10 kilo bag. So I cut it and sawed it. So the last lot I just minced because I needed to get through the bag. It had been pierced, so the vacuum had gone on it, and I just needed to get through it. So I just minced the whole lot. This lot I decided to cut and sort. So any nice meaty bits which weren't overly fatty and didn't have any gristle through them or anything like that, I put in one bowl, and the rest I put in another, making sure that there's still plenty of meaty bits in that other bowl with the fat as well, because we don't want it at a too high a ratio of fat. So these trim boxes are done at 90-10, which is what their mince is sold at. So by removing some of the meaty parts without fat, I'm going to bump the fat content of the mince up. I don't have a problem with that. Some people might, but I don't have a problem with that. So 80-20, 75-25, that's fine by me. So what I did was, when I was going through it, I cut up some really nice looking thick pieces of meat that had some marbling in it, but didn't have too many lines of any sort of gristle or big caps of fat or anything, because I'm not going to be slow cooking most of this. If you were slow cooking it, the fat wouldn't be an issue, but that's not the plan for these. I'm going to try the Wonder Bag again and a couple of other things. So I cut it all up, diced it all up, and put the nice diced meat bits into a bowl and all the other bits into another bowl to be minced. There was plenty of great cuts to choose from. I'm really happy with what comes in these boxes. A lot of it looks like the points of roast, so they've cut the points off because people don't want that pointy bit of a roast. So there's heaps of meat on it. I don't know enough about it to actually identify what the cuts are, but I'm really happy with this, and I'll probably buy it every month, and that's really great, because we used to really ration eating beef because it was just too expensive, but at $10 a kilo, it's the same price as the mince, same price as chicken. We can eat it the same way, which is really nice. So anyway, I got all those sorted into those bowls to do stuff with. I minced up the portion I was mincing, so that all the offcuts and everything else that were ready to be minced, I did that next. I used my Luvele mincer, which I really like. Again, I'll put an affiliate code in the comments if you're in the description if you're looking for it. I have an affiliate for like US, UK and Australia for that one if anyone's interested. It is, I really like this mincer. It is so easy to put together. It is so easy to clean. It runs flawlessly. I fall in love with it more every time I use it. It is so simple to put together that I don't mind doing small batches of it. I think I mentioned that before. Whereas when I used to use the KitchenAid mincer, I'd want to get everything done at once because it was just a lot of hassle. But because this is so easy to use and everything else, it was just so nice to be able to just do small batches if that's what I wanted to do. And it's got very low power draw. So I use the Luvele mincer. I only use the coarse grind. I don't run it through a second time, and I don't use the fine grind. I use the coarse one. It makes it more versatile. It makes it usable for a myriad of things. Whatever I decide I want to use it for, I can by doing that, rather than being limited to what I wanted to use it for. So it ended up being about 5 kilos of mince and about the same diced, approximately. I didn't weigh it as such though. So I ended up with a big bowl full of the diced beef, a big bowl of the mince, and 1.8 kilos of mince put aside for hamburgers for dinner, and a small bowl with 300 grams of mince in it to make beef stock paste. So I put them all in separate things, put the bulk of the mince in a container. I have these Tupperware bowls that a viewer gifted me. I'm going to have to look up her name and I'll put it in the bottom of the thing because I can't think of it off the top of my head. But one of the viewers sent me these Tupperware bowls. Used to be a Tupperware consultant and had these with the lids, and I use them for everything. They are awesome. So thank you very much. And I'm really sorry that I suck at names, but I'll put the name in the corner. But so I had the big bowl full of mince, a big bowl full of the diced beef, a small bowl which had the 300 grams for beef stock paste, and then the 1.8 kilos of mince left for hamburgers for the night. I added some salt and some onion powder to the 1.8 kilo pack of mince because that's all we do for hamburgers. Now, the last time I minced up the beef to use for hamburgers, it didn't hold together in patties very well because it was a coarser grind and things like that. So this time I made sure to emulsify it a bit. So all I did was when I added the salt and the onion powder, I worked it with my hands a bit, which is going to emulsify the meat a bit. It's going to, it does something to the proteins of the meat when you work it. It can make it tough if you overwork meat like that, but it needed just a little bit of work just to be able to hold itself together, because I don't like to add any binders for my hamburger patties. I don't like eggs and stuff in that. I use all that in my meatballs and rissoles and stuff like that, but for hamburger patties I like them to be just the beef. So it just meant that I had to work it a little bit with my hands to get that protein structure to be sticking a little bit better and hold into the shapes of the patties. I use the tortilla press to make what I suppose are smash burgers. So I would like to get one of those handheld, like cast iron press type things that you use in the pan. Like you put the ball of meat in the pan and then you use that cast iron press to press it out and you've got a smash burger. I basically use my cast iron tortilla press the same way. So I put the ball in the middle, I push it, I don't push it very hard, I just, push it down to smash it out a little bit, and then I put it in the pan and it shrinks up, and it shrinks up quite nice and evenly, which is really good. So it ends up the right size for our burger buns. I just find it really good for doing this. I like the really high heat in the pan because I like that caramelization, and they don't take very long to cook because we only do 90-gram patties, so that everyone can have 2 if they want. Or I also make some at a smaller weight so that Darryl and I can have double-decker burgers if that's what we want at the time and things like that. So I cooked them all off. I split the buns, I cut up lettuce and tomato, put the patties on a plate and let the kids serve themselves on the table to put what they do and don't want in their burgers. I think they opened plum barbecue to have with them this time. Some of them have mustard with it. There is apple butter barbecue that's available as well. Sometimes there's cashew cheese. They're allowed to use whatever they want on them, really. Mayo, anything like that. And so they serve themselves the burgers, and there is the ability to have 2 burgers if they want them. We don't tend to do sides, we just do the burgers, or they can leave some for the next day for lunch as a preference, whatever they choose to do there. So the next day I used up the other half of the minced beef and made a big batch of Bolognese. So I make Bolognese regularly because I like to freeze it. It is a really filling meal with lots of veggies and stuff in it that is really good for the kids to be able to heat up for themselves. So this is a meal that Surreal, Apollo or Sonnet can prepare themselves because I freeze it, and then I have jarred pasta sauce, canned pasta sauce. So they use the bolognese with the jar of pasta sauce, and they warm it up on the stove, and then they bring water to boil and use dried pasta. It's a really simple meal for them to make for themselves if I need them to be cooking for themselves, but it's got all those veggies and everything in it too, so it's one that I'm happy for them to eat. And sometimes they do eat it twice a week. That's just the way it goes. They all really enjoy it, and it's a nice simple thing to do, so sometimes they have it twice a week, and that's okay with me. So what I do is I cut up zucchini, carrot, onion, celery and garlic into chunks suitable for the Thermomix. I did get asked why I didn't use the Thermomix for the pasta sauce, and to be honest, I just forgot. Like, I sat there and diced it all up and didn't even think about using the Thermomix, because I could have, because I was going to puree it in the end anyway. So I have no idea why I didn't. Maybe my bowls were dirty. I'd have to look back at the footage to see if there was a clean bowl in the Thermomix, and if there was, then that's even weirder. But anyway, I do it in the Thermomix for the bolognese. I just mince it all up because I'm not going to puree this, obviously, because it is mince. I'm not going to puree mince, so I want it nice and small to be blended through the meat. I know I like to fill the bolognese with veggies. It's one of my things about bolognese is I like it to be full of veggies. So I cut up all the zucchini that was still good from the monthly shop. I would normally have gone through these earlier and shredded them all and then frozen them shredded and just used the shredded stuff, rather because we had a few that went bad, which went to the animals. But this month has been a little bit higgledy-piggledy with getting stuff done, and I just didn't get it all done. So what was usable I used, the rest went to the animals, and put them, and carrots were similar. If I have a lot of carrots and they're starting to grow or anything, I'd normally just shred them all and freeze them, and then I make the bolognese early on. See, I think that's the difference this month. Normally I would make bolognese within the first week of getting back from the shops because I have beef mince and the beef mince has to be used. But because I had the trim and it was vacuum sealed, it didn't need to be used as quickly, so I already had bolognese in the freezer and didn't need to rush to make more. So I left it in a bit later to do. So I just, so that's why I think some of the veggies were starting to turn. I had to trim them off and things like that. So I minced it all up in the Thermomix, and then I add a little bit of oil to the big buffalo canner pot, because that's what I use for most of my bulk cooking. I just don't really have a big pot to use at the moment. It's something that I need to invest in, a big sort of a 25 litre pot, but a nice wide one. Like, I think that the Soga ones are the ones that I've mentioned before, and I think there's like a 38 centimetre or something diameter, but 25 litres, that's the sort of thing I'm looking for. And I just haven't spent the money on it. So I put all the veggies and stuff in with a bit of oil in the bottom of the pot. I also minced up a kilo of bacon to add to the veggie mix, and I put that in the pot as well, and I sweat it all off. So I'm just looking for a bit of translucency in the onion and garlic, and the sweetness of the carrots to be released with that little bit of frying and things like that. Release some of the liquid, cook some of the liquid off. That's the aim. So I just put it in there and I stir it, and I keep doing everything else while I'm doing it, and I give it a mix, and I don't want any of it to burn, but I do want it to release its liquid and then some of that liquid to fry off as well. I add the mince in next, so I just pull it in and I break it up into the veg, and then I let it cook off for a bit as well. So I want to keep it fairly broken up and moving through and browning off, just so that it starts holding its own shape. I did add a jar of my mushrooms can in stock as well. That was the last one I had left on the shelf. Actually, if I can get mushrooms cheap again, I need to make some more of that. The last box of mushrooms I got, I made into all the marinated mushrooms, which Darryl really likes, but having the mushrooms in stock is really handy for things like this. So I do need to make some more of those too. So I put that jar in there, and then just got the beef to cook off in that liquid. Again, release all its fat and water, and then some of that liquid to cook off as well. While that was going, I got started on my beef stock paste. So this is super handy to have in the freezer, and I normally have chicken and beef in the freezer, but I forgot to keep some chicken aside to do for this month, so I'm going to have to do that next month. What you're basically doing is adding a bunch of veggies to your Thermomix or a food processor or pot. You can do them on the stove. The Thermomix just makes it a simpler exercise. I used carrot, onion, garlic and celery, but you can use any veg you really want. Like, you can use leeks and celeriac and anything like that, depending on the flavour tones that you're wanting for your stock. I just used what I had, which was basics this month. I put it all into the Thermomix, and I also added a couple of handfuls of dried mushroom as well, because I want that umami kind of flavour in my stock paste. I set them to cool off in the Thermomix. As I said, you could do it in the stove top though, but the Thermomix, it's nice to just be able to throw it in. There is a guided cooking recipe for making the stock as well, and it's just nice and simple to do it. Once the meat had cooked off all the liquid, I started adding the extra liquid and the dal to the bolognese. So we use pearl barley or dal or lentils or something in the mince. I do like the texture of the pearl barley, but it is a carb rather than a protein, whereas the lentils and dals are more proteins. So we have been using this, it's chana dal is the particular type that I'm using, which is a split yellow pea as far as I'm aware, and a lentil of sorts. So I've been using this to make our curried dal that we make with roti, and it's really nice, and everyone's really enjoying it. So I used it in the bolognese last time as well, and everyone was okay. They were a bit funny about the extra texture of the lentils initially, but they've gotten used to it and they don't mind it so much anymore. Pearl barley, I do prefer the texture of pearl barley, but because it is an added carb, I would prefer the protein if everyone's happy with it. So everyone seems to be happy with the dal. So that's what we've been going with. So I added the dal, and then I added a couple of jars of passata. I also had some chicken stock from the hamper to use. I used some of it to rinse out the passata bottles and then tip them in. Added both of the chicken broths that were from the hamper, as well as a few tins of crushed tomato. The quantities really depend on the amount of liquid that you need to cook off your grain that you're using in there, your barley or your lentils or your dal or whatever you need, because you want them to be soft. So you may need to add more liquid to allow there to be enough liquid for it all to cook off. That's what you have to judge that to a degree. So sometimes I add more later if I need to. I also added a jar of tomato paste. Again, it helps with thickening it up. Some people don't like the taste of tomato paste in their bolognese. We don't have a problem with it, so that's what we use. Then I simmer it for as long as it takes to get those lentils or barley or whatever you've got in there to soften, and the tomato base to thicken up. So I basically simmer it on and off, like simmer it on low for hours. I go through and scrape the bottom up as needed to make sure it doesn't burn to the bottom, though it still sometimes happens, especially in the big buffalo canner. But I go and try and make sure to bring everything up off the bottom as often as possible to make sure that we don't have any burning on the bottom, and stir it through and take judgment call on those dal or barley or whatever I'm using, and whether it needs more liquid. We do like our bolognese to end up quite thick because we freeze it in Ziploc bags, in gallon Ziploc bags, 1.2 kilo amounts, and then we add the canned pasta sauce to it as part of that's how we do it as the meal. So it's 1.2 kilos of this really thick veggie meat tomato based sauce, and then my pasta sauce also has veggies in it, but it's a thinner liquid, so we mix those two together to make enough for everyone to eat. So I watch it and assess as I go. Back at the stock paste, I pureed up the cooked veg. So all the veggies are cooked, so I pureed them up. Then you add the salt and the fresh herbs, and it calls for red wine, which I sometimes have on hand for cooking and sometimes don't. I didn't at this particular instance, but I got this stock base in the hamper with that chicken stock, and this one is a red wine stock base, like a flavour base, and I thought that would work quite well. So I put the amount of red wine that was supposed to go into it using this stock base instead, and then just put the rest in the bolognese. I also added a dash of Worcestershire sauce, which is not in the recipe, but again, the mushrooms weren't either. So I'm looking for that depth of flavour. It's a beef stock paste, so I like my beef stock to be quite hearty, quite deep flavour. So I added a bit of Worcestershire sauce, and then added the beef that I'd minced up in there as well, and cooked it on high heat again for as long as it took. So cooked I think it's 20 minutes that it runs for, the mince and the veggies and everything else. You can slow cook these, you can do it on a stovetop, whatever else. I'm just running by the basic method in the Thermomix because I'm doing everything else. It's nice to run it in the background. It's full sunlight, daylight at the moment, so plenty of power on the panels to run it as well. So then it just cooks it all up together. While that's running, I added further seasonings to the bolognese. I add some Worcestershire sauce, I use some balsamic vinegar, some smoked paprika, some salt. Sometimes I use Italian herbs, sometimes I use a bit of pepper, sometimes I might add something a bit spicy. Sometimes it needs some bouillon powder for just to bring that flavour up, a bit more salt, maybe a dash of sugar. It really just depends on your taste. And because this bolognese has so many veggies and stuff in it, it really is one that you have to decide how you want it to taste. The amount of veggies I'm not precise on, it's what I've got available, so sometimes there will be more veggies than others, which will impact the flavour of the dish. So I've also used those different chicken stocks in there than normal, that beef red wine base, so I really have to just taste it and adjust it as necessary, and that's the best way to make bolognese in my opinion. This sort of style bolognese, obviously it's not authentic, it is Australianized family bolognese, but yeah, so I taste it and I add flavours as needed to get it to where I want it to be. In between all of this, Darryl had cut up the rind from one of the pork roasts and cooked it over some baby potatoes on the other side of the bench because we had those pork roasts that Snell need to be using. So I just thought I'd show you what we had for lunch that day, which was the baby potatoes that had been roasted in the pork fat, and then I made a salad up using the baby spinach that we're still getting through. That baby spinach lasted for a good 3.5 to 4 weeks in that box before it got to a point where I fed it to the ducks. The ducks love baby spinach, but I wanted to use as much of it as I could before then. It lasted really, really well. I was really happy with that. So I did a salad up with, you know, some julienne carrots and some of the baby spinach. I think there was a bit of lettuce left over from the hamburgers, all that sort of stuff. Whatever I had, made some duck egg mayo to drizzle over the top of it, and we had those baby potatoes with it as well. And that was lunch in between everything else. Once the stock was finished cooking, I blitzed it up as smooth as possible. So as smooth as I could be bothered, realistically. So there's lots of methods you can do to get it smoother, depending what you're using with the Thermomix. If it's too thick, it's going to flick up the sides and it's going to come off the blades if there's not enough in there. So you can thin it out a little bit. Just add a bit of boiling water, thin it out a little bit, or a bit of stock or whatever you want. This is going to be stored in the freezer, so it doesn't really matter. You can add whatever you want to thin it out. And then once it thins out a little bit more, it will go a little bit smoother. I just whizzed it up, scraped the sides down, whizzed it up, scraped the sides down, whizzed it up. I don't really have a problem with it having little flecks of this stuff in whatever I put it in. It doesn't worry me. But if you want it to somewhat dissolve, then you need to get it as fine as possible, because you're going to have sediment, and the bigger chunks that are in it, the bigger sediment you're going to have. So the finer, the smoother you can get it, the less sediment you're going to have. So you're better off adding a little bit of water or stock or something to it to thin it out and get it really smooth if that's what you want. I think I might double it next time too. I haven't made it in a long time in the Thermomix. I've had to do it on the stovetop because I didn't have a Thermomix that I could use for cooking, and I think if it was doubled then it would have a better quantity to be blitzed up in the Thermomix. But I just wanted to get it done, so I did it. So I put it in a Pyrex dish to go in the freezer. It's got a really, really high salt content, so when you put it in the freezer you can still scoop it out with a spoon, and that's the beauty of this, that it's stock paste. You store it in the freezer, but you can just scoop it out because of that salt content. You do have to remember, if you're using it, that you have to be aware when adding salt to a dish that there is already a fair bit of salt in this stock paste. You can make it without salt, but it will be rock hard in the freezer. So if you do it without salt, you need to put it into like ice cube trays so that you've got single serving sizes that you can pull out of the freezer, rather than needing to take a serving size out of a bowl or something like that. We're big salt people here, so it doesn't worry me. And some of my medication means that I need more salt in my diet too. But it's used as part of a recipe, generally speaking, so I'm happy to have the salt in there and then adjust the salt in a dish that I'm making if need be. But if you don't want to use salt, you can just put it in like ice cube trays, or you can scoop it out with a spoon and put like teaspoonfuls on silicone trays, let it flash freeze, and then throw them all into a Ziploc bag. That would work as well. So these stock pastes are just wonderful things to have in the freezer. They're just so handy to have there for making so many things. So I highly suggest making them, especially if you've got a Thermomix, because it makes it nice and easy to make them. So that one in the Pyrex dish, and it went in the freezer. So that was everything for this video. I did a whole lot with the diced beef, so I think that's on the next video. A whole bunch of different things with the diced beef, some pies and some stew in the Wonder Bag and things like that. So I think I'll share that one on the next video. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.